Welcome back, everybody, to Play Like a Jet Live. I'm Luke Grant. Clay is back. Had a week of vacation over in Jersey. How you doing, man? You didn't miss a lot, but it's starting to heat up now with training camp kicking off today.
Yeah, man, I'm happy to be back in Florida. New Jersey wasn't too bad. The weather was actually very enjoyable. Went to a wedding, had some fun, maybe a little too much fun at this, but no, it was a good time. I'm happy to be back, and it's perfect timing. Now football's getting started.
Something that wasn't so fun, and Jets fans are extremely stressed about online. Zach Wilson still hasn't signed his deal. What we're going to do today, guys, we've got Andy Vasquez, who's going to join us in a second to break down the entire day of Jets training camp, the first practice. They were in shells today. Zach Wilson wasn't there. Wanted to start off with that, Clay. What's your concern level now? Because for the last month and a half, as the conjectures started to roll on and he hasn't been signed, I have been fairly non-concerned. It hasn't been an issue for me. Now that camp started and he has the same agent as Nick Bosa, who held out 2 years ago at camp, what's your concern level now as a fan, as someone covering the Jets?
I mean, obviously he's going to sign at some point, but it's stressful because I mean, it's stressful from a Jets fan's perspective, just because we moved on from Sam and we just want to see our new toy. We want to know what he can do with this new group of players, and I think that's the most frustrating part about it. Not that he's not signed; it's just you just want to see him already, because we've never seen him with the whole group in pads, and it's just an exciting time, and I think that's why people are frustrated more than anything. But I'm kind of in that same boat. I'm not worried. I don't think it's going to hinder his growth, but I also don't think it's the greatest look that he's not signed. And we had how many months? Late July, so we've had pretty much 3 full months to get this done, and he's one of three or two first-round picks to not be signed.
The only one now.
He's the only one now.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's that. So I wish it was a better. I wish he signed already, but I mean, it is what it is, and he's going to play week 1. Obviously, it's just a matter of time.
To talk about it a little bit more, let's bring in Andy Vasquez from NorthJersey.com. Does a whole lot of work with Scott over on the podcast. Andy, thanks for jumping on, man. The hot topic on everyone's tongues is Zach Wilson, him not being at camp. Let's jump into that a little bit and start there. Clay and I just mentioned it. What's your concern level for the Jets? And if there was a bit of let's call it a pie chart of blame, how would you divide that up between Zach Wilson, his agent, the Jets, and then Joe Douglas?
Wow, that's a lot to figure out there. First of all, you got to get me back to your first question because you got me thinking with that second one and I forgot. So just quickly, what was it again? Sorry.
Just what's your concern level for someone that follows the Jets? Do you think Zach's going to be in the building soon? All the offset language conversation. What's going on here? Break it down for fans.
So basically, where we're at right now, I wouldn't be super concerned. Ideally, you want him here yesterday. You want him here when the team reports, especially when you're talking about this team that has a whole new vibe and a whole new, look going on this season. This is not a good look to start this new era of Jets football without your quarterback out there. But ultimately, let's say he misses the rest of this week, does it suck? Yes. Does it matter long-term at all? No. I mean, the Jets aren't going to be in pads for the first time until Monday. These practices, just because of the way the CBA is set up, they can't practice in pads till Monday. So these are light practices. Today was lighter than some of the stuff that we saw during OTAs and in minicamp. So it's not an ideal thing and it's not a good look. But I think if you guys remember back in 2018, Sam Darnold missed those 3 practices and it was the biggest deal at the time and people were freaking out. And a week later, nobody talked about it or thought about it again until this week. So it's not the way you want to start. And it would be much better if, like you guys said, they had figured this out in the 3 months beforehand. But I think the reason that doesn't happen is because negotiations are made under pressure and there was no reason for any side to move off of their stance until this point. Now there are consequences. Now Zach Wilson is missing practice. Now the Jets are being in many circles panned as being the same old Jets because they weren't able to get him under contract. So both sides are losing something here in terms of either reputation or actual practice reps. And now it hurts for somebody, and somebody's going to have to blink first. So what happens now is the Jets have made it pretty clear, and they have a history of not moving off of their stance on the offset money. And they have a basis for that stance, considering that out of the 32 teams in the league, I think only 2 teams regularly include offset or don't include offset language in contracts. And I think that's Jacksonville and the Rams. And obviously Wilson has some negotiating power because Trevor Lawrence got a deal without offset language, and he was picked one spot ahead of him. But then we saw today Trey Lance signed with the 49ers. I'm guessing he didn't get exactly everything he wanted in that contract. So there's going to have to be a compromise struck here. I think if both sides get dug in, there is a chance that he misses some of these contact practices, and that would be the worst case scenario. And at that point, you could get into a situation where, hey, maybe this does kind of hurt him going into the regular season. But I think until that happens, as a Jets fan, you got to kind of hope that at a certain point, if the Jets aren't going to budge, and if you want to do the blame chart, the pie chart of blame, I mean, I think the Wilson camp has known, it's not a secret that the Jets want this language in the contract. So I think there's blame on both sides. The Jets certainly, there's incentive there to just make it happen and just to move on and get things started differently. But then if you do that, you set a precedent that every player who comes here can now ask for the offset language. So I see both sides of this. But really what we're talking about here, and this is why it's kind of stupid, is like this only becomes an issue if this guy sucks.
Yeah.
So, and we're talking about like a few $1 million here and there. So
Yeah.
I don't really get it, but I get it. It's not a good answer, but the issue is that like if we get to next week and he's missing time, that's when you should get concerned. I wouldn't be super stressed right now.
All right, let's start to get into the guys who were there. Andy, you were at practice today as the Jets were in shells or half shells. The 2 quarterbacks that played, obviously Mike White and James Morgan, in your camp notes for NorthJersey.com, you called them both pretty underwhelming. Talk to us a little bit about the QB play today, what we saw from the offense in general, and how those 2 guys fared against the Jets defense.
Yeah, we saw a lot of runs and we saw a lot of short passes. Now, Mike White was the guy who got all the reps with the first team, and he completed, I think, I don't have the numbers right in front of me at this moment, but I think it was 8 of 11. So, I mean, he was effective and productive in that sense, but he didn't throw down the field much. He made a couple of bad throws. It seemed like, with Wilson out there, they were kind of unleashing things. And today it was kind of like it was a more reined in version of the offense. Without getting into too much detail, because I'm not supposed to say exactly, what kind of plays they're running. But I can say that, there was a lot of runs, especially when James Morgan was in there. I think he only completed 5 of 8 passes and then also handed the ball off 8 times. So we saw a lot of runs, and that's not really too informative at this stage because they're not in pads yet. But those guys, they looked fine, but like the whole thing for them in this training camp is one of them has to prove that they're good enough to be a backup. Otherwise, the Jets are going to have to go get a veteran. So that's an interesting storyline going forward. But, I mean, it today confirmed what we kind of already knew, is that these guys aren't on the level of Zach Wilson. And while Robert Saleh is saying that he wants to give one of them the chance to prove that they can be a backup quarterback capable of winning this team games, the conversation isn't like, can one of these guys replace Zach Wilson, which I think tells you everything you need to know. And that's what we saw on the field today.
It obviously wasn't a contact practice today, Andy, so it's difficult to get a gauge on this. But if you had to say this unit was the winner or the loser today, who do you think took the victory today as far as offense versus defense, if there was one in your opinion?
It's hard to say because, like I said, they were so conservative in terms of moving the ball down the field. I thought definitely you saw some nice things out of the receivers and the running backs. Some of them got into the passing game. Michael Carter, I think, caught a short pass and had some carries, and the offensive line looked good, opening up holes. Elijah Moore at wide receiver had another nice catch for a big play. Chris Herndon, who was working with the first and second team, had a nice catch, probably the longest catch of the practice. So it was a pretty uneventful day in terms of like real competition, and it would be hard for me to say that one group looked demonstrably better than another. But I think you saw a lot of the guys that impressed during OTAs continuing to put in good work. And I think the best thing, if you're a Jets fan, that you saw during this practice was Mekhi Becton was out there with the starting offensive line, and he's healthy, fully healthy after missing basically the entire offseason program. And that's what you got to be excited about, seeing this Jets offensive line that they hope to be starting on the field together and getting reps, because that didn't happen the last couple of years. And we saw the results in the regular season. It was bad.
Clay, I wanted to backtrack quickly and talk about the backup quarterback position. Clay, we've talked a lot about kind of who's going to back up Wilson. This Jets room has no one with NFL experience. They haven't started a snap or played a snap between them. We've talked about guys that could come in and play. Blake Bortles was released by Green Bay. He's an option. Brian Hoyer isn't going to get vaccinated. Looks like he'll be released from New England. Where's your head at now, a couple of weeks on, with that spot, with Mike White, with James Morgan, and then some of the veterans? Do you think they'll bring someone in, Clay?
You have to. I mean, we saw what happened in 2019 when we had to go to, obviously we had Trevor Siemian, but he got hurt right away. And then you saw what happened when Luke Falk got in there. We can't go through that again. I don't care who the coach is. We can't go through something like that. And Mike White, I mean, James Morgan, what did they do for you? I still think that Nick Foles is a viable option. He has no use in Chicago. Are the Jets interested? That I don't know. I mean, I don't have the intel to tell me one way or another. But, I mean, he has a relationship with Douglas. They obviously have the need. And it's probably like it could be a situation where like, all right, we can just give you a conditional 7th round pick just to take the contract off your hands, and maybe that turns into nothing. So I still think Nick Foles could be on this team. I like Bortles. I know a lot of people won't like him, but he's still he can be a backup quarterback in this league. I mean, he's obviously won games before. So if you just need him to. And obviously, we're talking about this as a worst case scenario. That's just for them being on the field. But off the field is also important too. These guys, they need to know the playbook. They need to be able to mentor Zach Wilson. That's the main priority, because we're hoping that Wilson could be out there for all 17 games this year. But we need someone to help him out on the sidelines. And like Josh McCown was there for Sam Darnold. Like that's huge. And obviously, when McCown left, it kind of hurt Sam a little bit. But no, I mean, I don't think Mike White will be the number 2 quarterback, and I don't have intel telling me otherwise. But I don't think they ride into the season with Mike White or James Morgan for that matter.
Let's transition to the guys that are going to be catching balls from hopefully Zach Wilson come next week. Andy, you touched on Elijah Moore quickly. Correct me if I'm wrong. It sounded like the starting receivers with the ones they were Keelan Cole, Jamison Crowder, and Corey Davis, and primarily Denzel Mims and Elijah Moore were working with the 2s. Is that how it went, and how did that unit perform today?
I think Moore was out there too early in practice with the 1s. He also worked with the 2s. Mims was definitely more working with the second team. I think maybe exclusively the entire practice. But yeah, that's pretty much what they're going to roll with. And if you look at like last year, Mims at several points during the season was like the best receiver on the field. So it's an upgrade, and we don't know exactly how much of an upgrade yet, because we just don't know how these guys are going to fit into this offense, and if they're capable of kind of backing up the things that we have seen. I mean, we know what Cole is, and we know he's going to be solid, and we know what Crowder is, and we know he's going to be solid if he can stay healthy. But the other guys, there's still like some question marks about Corey Davis and if he can replicate what he was able to do last year in Tennessee. I mean, there's every reason to think that he can. And obviously with Elijah Moore, he looked great during the offseason program, but until you see him lining up against other teams, he's not the biggest guy. Seeing if his speed is enough to win some of these matchups where guys are going to be physical with him, we still don't really know. And we don't know with Mims. I mean, he had some really nice moments last year, but never consistently put it all together. Now that he's kind of like the 4 instead of the 1 or the 2, are some things going to open up for him? I mean, I think it's a possibility, but he's also got to find a way to get open more consistently and be more consistently productive throughout the course of a game, which he hasn't really proven yet. I think he never had more than 4 catches or 73 yards in any of those games last season. So there's the potential there, and I think it would be hard to put together a group that was not better than last year's weapons, but there's a lot of question marks. But I think this group has the potential for huge upside.
Andy, I apologize in advance for asking you to speculate here. Obviously, we're not sitting in the room with Joe Douglas or Robert Saleh or Mike LaFleur, but do you think the receiving room, there's a benefit for them, and their belief is if we put them with the 2s early, it's a checkpoint, it's a confidence booster, asking them to improve, overtake a player like Keelan Cole? Or do you think the Jets just believe right now that Keelan Cole is the 2nd or 3rd best receiver on their roster?
I think, and I don't know this for sure, but my guess would be that the guys who they think are the best are the ones who are getting reps with the first team, with some exceptions. Like, I think Mims missing some time during OTAs kind of maybe put him back to where he needs to work his way back to that spot. Like, I think maybe if he had been there the whole time, he would be getting some time with the ones right now. But I think generally they're going to give the most opportunity to the guys who have shown them the most. That's just kind of my sense of being around Saleh in the spring and being around Douglas for the last couple of years. It's kind of how they do things. But it's also very hard to predict at this early stage, especially this early, because so much of it is just like seeing how they respond when they put them in a pressure situation, like being with the number 1s, or seeing how different combinations fit together. I think that's part of it too. So obviously Saleh is never going to go into that much detail with us about how and why he's doing this, and he shouldn't, because there's a competitive advantage to that. So we have to speculate, but it's a combination of that. And I think, give me 2 weeks and let's see how the rotations look then. And I think it'll be a lot more telling, and especially when we get to that first preseason game and we see, how they're running guys out there, you'll have a much better sense of how they really feel about these guys.
Mm-hmm. Clay, let's put a bow on the receiver conversation now. Coming into the season, where do you think this Jets unit stacks up? We've been a bottom 5 unit perennially, with maybe the exception of 2015, with obviously that incredible Marsha-Decker combination. Where do you think we fit? Is it that 15 to 20 range? Is it 20 to 25? Is it still that bottom 7? Where do you think the Jets receiving core is going to stack up heading into the 2021 season, Clay?
The optimist in me wants to say they're in that 15 range, but Andy kind of just hit on it. We don't know what we're getting out of Moore. We don't know what we're getting out of Mims. We don't really know what we're getting out of Davis. You can expect what we'll get out of Crowder, but even Keelan Cole, I think I think we can expect him to do what he's normally done, but we can't be sure. So with there being pretty much 3 question marks in that group, I don't think you can realistically put them above that bottom 7 until they prove it. I think they can be in that top 15 range. Absolutely, I think they can be, because I love Elijah Moore, as we all know, and I love Denzel Mims. So I do think they can get to that point, but they have to prove it on the field first.
There's a lot up in the air at the receiver position. And Andy, I wanted now to transition to the other side of the ball, because I made a video for Play Like a Jet on our YouTube talking about some of the positional camp battles. And 2 I talked about were corner, starting on the outside, and also will linebacker. Now, I understand that Bryce Hall wasn't there today. He had an exception because he was at the birth of his child. So congratulations to Bryce. But what did the outside corner position look like for the ones, and also that will linebacker spot next to Davis and Mosley? Who was starting there? What was the rep allocation like?
So they moved a lot of guys around today, and it's, to be honest with you, it's hard a lot of times to keep track of all this, because I have to track the quarterbacks, and today that was kind of the priority. So I'll just be honest, I didn't get every guy who was out there. From what I remember, Lamar Jackson was definitely out there filling in for where Hall usually would have been. I think Bless Austin was on the other side. Javelin Guidry got some reps in there. I think Pinnock as well. But it's hard. It blends together because they were shuffling in the quarterbacks a lot, and it was kind of hard to figure out when, we look up and it's after the play and it's like, oh, was that Morgan? Was that, Morgan or White? So it was hard to keep track of it all. But this is what we're going to see. I mean, I don't know if outside of Hall and the rookies like Eccles and Carter, who I think was out there as well, there's not a ton of guys on this team whose job is safe at cornerback just because it's so wide open and it's so unproven. And I think, you're seeing here what you're seeing with the backup quarterback position, which is Robert Saleh. Didn't want to go get a veteran because he believes that they can uncover some potential starters in this group, which is nice. But again, unless, at quarterback, Morgan or White shows in this preseason that they can do enough to be a quarterback who wins a game for this team, they're going to have to go get a veteran. And the same thing is true at cornerback. Unless one of these guys steps up, or probably it's going to take more than one steps up to prove that they can do this, which the Jets really don't have. I mean, Bless Austin has kind of shown it. Hall has kind of shown it. But other than that, with Brian Poole now gone, who is there? So what if the cornerbacks look like trash the entire preseason and training camp? What are they going to do then? That's a huge thing that's kind of hanging over this team and a big thing to start. Again, it was hard to say today because they weren't being challenged. There definitely was some plays where the secondary got beat, and definitely were some plays where, there were ill-advised throws that they knocked down and I thought maybe could have been intercepted. Until Wilson gets out there and you're going against a guy who has shown that he can kind of sling it, I don't think we're going to really see those guys get tested. So I guess that's another part of the downside of being without Zach Wilson right now. But it's going to be a fascinating battle, and it's kind of it's a big risk because Saleh it's cool that he's showing confidence in the coaching staff and in these young players, but it could be a thing that hurts this team in the regular season if a few players don't step up.
Clay, Andy led me perfectly into my next question. Steven Nelson signed with Philadelphia through the week. He was someone we talked about for the Jets. I know Nick with U Stadium had mentioned him and his want to come to the Jets if things played out. Brian Poole obviously went over to New Orleans. So as Andy mentioned, there's nobody here now to bring in as reinforcements in the secondary. It really is the young group the Jets are rolling with. How are you feeling about Lamar Jackson and Bless Austin being the Jets starting outside corners right now, 5 weeks before the season starts?
Not great. Just to say the least. No, I mean, with those two guys in particular, Bless Austin, he had a good rookie season. For what he was. No, he wasn't dynamic and he wasn't the top 20 corner, but he did his job. He was good. He took a step back last year. And obviously Lamar Jackson, I think he'll be most known for having the same name as the former MVP and for being the corner that was one-on-one with Henry Ruggs on that game-losing touchdown against Las Vegas. But no, I mean, having met Lamar Jackson, I was able to talk to him for a little bit out in Mobile. He does not lack confidence whatsoever. So I know he's putting in the work. I know he's trying to get better. And no, I don't know him personally, but he just shows that when he speaks to you, and he kind of just gravitates. You kind of just gravitate towards him because he has that confidence. So I'm curious to see how he looks. Maybe he looks better with a full off season, and he's getting more starting snaps because there are such young players in this secondary group. So he's just bound to get more snaps in general. So I'm not feeling great about it, especially with Steven Nelson being gone. I loved Brian Poole here, but I'm not too worried about him leaving because I like what they have. Obviously, everyone knows I love what they have in Michael Carter II. And Javelin Guidry, like even when he was on the field last year replacing Poole, he actually had some pretty good snaps. So that's something to build off of. So I'm not too worried about Poole being gone, but not having that veteran outside corner that we can kind of go to in free agency, it's kind of rough, especially with I think the only one left is Richard Sherman, but we all know what's going on there, so that's very unlikely. So it's going to be, I think it's going to be a very long, interesting roller coaster of a ride with the secondary this season.
Yeah, I'm with you and with Nick. It just popped up on the screen. I love Michael Carter's flexibility. Obviously, this is the Michael Carter the second show. I wanted now, Andy, to touch on the people who weren't on the field outside of Zach Wilson. I mentioned Bryce Hall. Who else wasn't there? Because I know Robert Saleh, when he spoke post-practice, gave some insight on a couple of guys and their injury. So if you could recap that and who isn't going to be on the field for the Jets in the next week or two.
Absolutely. Just one thing to go back to real quick with Lamar Jackson. If you guys want to root for someone, that's the guy to root for. I mean, it wasn't his fault he got lined up against Ruggs on that play.
Yeah.
Did the best he could. And the dude handled it with a total pro after. Said all the right things, faced us, took a bunch of tough questions, and handled himself really well. And I thought, played relatively well the rest of the year. Can definitely, show some improvement. It's too early to know yet, but he's a guy that you should want to emerge. And that would be a cool story if he did. Yeah. As for the other guys who weren't on the field, Quinnen Williams is the biggest one. Robert Saleh gave something that we haven't really seen from coaches around the league or Jets coaches before. He gave us a pretty specific timetable for when he expects Quinnen to be back. First of all, he says that he still feels good about Quinnen's recovery and that Quinnen has been running and is in good shape and has been at the facility every day and feels like when he gets back that he'll be able to jump right into things. But the Jets, who expected him to be ready for the start of camp after having that foot injury, I think it was a broken foot and surgery back in the spring, they wanted to take a more conservative approach and make sure it doesn't happen in the other foot. So that's all the information we got on that, but it sounds like they're just being cautious. They expect him to be back before the Green Bay preseason game. So the Jets are going to Green Bay for those joint practices. They'll be there 3 weeks from right now. Saleh said this was a conservative estimate, so there's a chance he'll be ready to go before that. But that's kind of the time frame for Quinnen. Some of the other guys, Vinny Curry, he's dealing with he had an undisclosed medical procedure at some point during this offseason. The expectation is that he'll be back before week 2 at some point in the regular season. So those are two important guys on the defensive tackle who are question marks. The other one, Kyle Phillips, he is dealing with that ankle injury that he suffered in October of last year, the season-ending ankle injury. He's expected also to be back before the Green Bay game. And then, okay, I had this a second ago. It's a lot of guys in confusing timetables.
Ashton Davis, right?
Ashton Davis, and he's week 2 of the regular season. He's obviously dealing with that foot injury he suffered late last year that ended his season and led to surgery. So those are the 4 main guys. If there's one I'm forgetting, I put it in my notebook, but I can't remember. But yeah, and obviously Marcus May came back off of the NFI list before the first practice and was out there today and looked normal. So that's good news for the Jets. And one thing you guys should know about May is that Gerard Davis, who went to Florida with him, said that May is as motivated as ever, that May did not enjoy missing the offseason program. And once he got out here for mandatory minicamp, was really pumped about the chance to get back for training camp. So obviously the negotiations didn't work out the way he wanted to, but it seems like Marcus May is ready to go and really pumped for the season. So that's good news for Jets fans.
Andy, I wanted to close out with a general question about how the practice was today. In the past few years, we've heard a lot about the energy levels and some of those kind of things. What did you think the impact was of Zach Wilson being there on the group and on the coaching staff? Did it feel a little flat? Obviously, I understand the passing game and things like that weren't like they should have been. What was the energy level like in Robert Saleh's first day as the New York Jets head coach at training camp?
So to be honest with you, you see Salah as this fiery guy on the sidelines on those, we watched him with the 49ers the last couple of years, but he's not really, there's none of that. And there hasn't been it. That seems to be like him being happy on game day when his players succeed. The practices have all been high energy, high intensity, but it's not like this rah type deal. It's not, it just is consistent. And I will say today was very similar to what we saw during OTAs. It was efficient. It seemed consistent. And I will say that there were guys who they were excited to be out there. There was like, after the first play, there was a little like pushing and shoving. And we saw that a few times today. So I don't think energy is an issue. I don't think focus is an issue. I think certainly something's missing without Wilson there, but it didn't feel like anything different or flat or anything like that. It just seems like they've been very consistent, and that's what we saw today. And I think that's what you want to see.
Andy, really appreciate you joining us. Make sure you're following everything Andy does at northjersey.com, USA Today. Andy, tell us a little bit about what you've got coming up down the pipeline and where everyone can find your work.
Yeah, so northjersey.com, we have a great deal for subscribers. I think it's $1 for 6 months, and you can get with that. I have weekly subscriber pieces where kind of go in depth on either an interview with a player or something that's been going on around the Jets. So you can look forward to that every week going forward at northjersey.com. I'll also complete coverage of the Zach Wilson contract situation and complete coverage of every day of training camp. I'll be in Green Bay in a couple weeks there, bringing you everything there. And it's just going to be a really interesting ride as we get ready for the regular season. Because as we talked about, I mean, there's a lot of excitement and there's a lot of question marks. And I think there's the potential for this team to surprise some people, and there's the potential for it not to go as well as fans would like. But I think it's not going to be worse than last year. So Jets fans should be excited and looking forward to this season, and definitely check out northjersey.com for all my coverage. And you can follow me at Twitter at Andy_Vasquez.
Appreciate it, Andy. Thank you so much for the time, and good luck with everything with your camp.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Clay, we've got a couple of topics we need to hit on before we head off. I know Splash, our producer, has a question on Morgan Moses that he's going to bring up, and a couple other questions that have come in through the chat. So let's jump into that. He asked Andy how Morgan Moses looked today. Unfortunately, obviously, we just let Andy go, but I actually read Andy's notebook, and he said the offensive line looked incredibly good. He said both Becton and Morgan Moses looked fantastic early on. Obviously, they're in shell, half shells. They're not in full pads. You don't have that contact, but it's exciting to see or to hear that those two guys look so good in this scheme and so athletically gifted, and how well that's going to project to this offense, Clay.
No, it's great. I mean, obviously last year there was some concern with George Fant being the right tackle. And obviously with Mekhi Becton being a rookie, you don't know what you're going to get out of a rookie. It doesn't matter where they're drafted. So I'm sure now that we know what Becton's looking like, we know what Morgan Moses can do. It only just brings you more confidence that this offensive line can get it done. I'm still worried a little bit about the interior. I mean, McGovern should improve from last year. Yeah. Van Roten, I keep doing that. Van Roten, I mean, if he wins the right guard position, which I think we all assume that he will, he has to improve from last year, especially in the running game. If they're running as much as they're saying, he's got to improve, or else he might not even touch the field anymore. So there's still some concern there, but just knowing that the tackles are set, and with George Fant still on the roster, so like he's the swing guy. So if Becton goes down or if Moses goes down, which doesn't seem like that ever happens, knock on wood.
Touch wood. Yep.
No, I mean it's good. It's good to have that security, because the Jets, and we know that the offensive line's always banged up, especially for this team, and they never have the depth to fill it in. So it's good that they're kind of focusing on that. They kind of focus on that this year, because like, even with all these additions, they haven't released anyone. Like, so they still have the depth. We'll see what happens come week one, but I'm excited, and it's great to hear that Morgan Moses and Becton are looking good day one.
Yeah, I'm with you, Nick. I'm amped as well. Can't wait to see this unit and the improvement the Jets are going to have on the offensive line. Clay, this is where I wanted to finish. Andy touched on it when we spoke to him about Robert Saleh not being that rah-rah guy.
Yeah.
He isn't that dude at practice, but on the sideline he is. Someone that was, and we saw that in Hard Knocks in 2009, was Rex Ryan. And PFF had an interesting piece they released. I think Taj, one of their interns, led it, talking about wins above replacement and how that's measured. And they actually had Rex Ryan as, I think it was the 8th or 9th best head coach as far as wins added during the 2010s. So over the last 10 or 11 years, he was the 9th most effective head coach in the NFL. There were some precursors in there that had to coach for at least 5 years. But what's your take on that? Because we had the ups and the downs and the good and the bad of Rex. How did you feel looking back on the Rex Ryan era? And do you kind of agree with PFF's analysis there?
So this is from 2010 to now?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm trying to go through our seasons with him. Like, we had an 8-8, 11-5, a 4-12, or 5-11, whatever it was. And then he wasn't too great with Buffalo either. So I don't know how he's top 10. If you want to take that for just 2009, 2010, then yeah, he's but I don't know if we can take the whole 2010 decade. No, I mean, I know he gets a lot of hate for how he acts in the media and how he's just kind of like that. He's that brash personality, especially when they're losing. It's not what you always want to hear.
Yeah.
But when you're winning, I mean, obviously as a diehard Jets fan, there's nothing better than to hear your head coach just pump up his team to the fans, to the media, to his own players. Like, it's incredible to hear. And that's why everyone loves Hard Knocks when they were on. Unfortunately, Darrelle Revis wasn't on it the entire season until the very end. But no, it was awesome to see that from the team. But unfortunately, things went sour, and that rah type didn't really work out, because losing is all that matters. Like, if you lose, it doesn't matter what kind of personality you are. It's not gonna work out. So, but no, it was very odd to see that he was top 10 in the 2010 decade.
Yeah, it was an interesting piece. But if you want to see everything that we're doing, I implore you to go and check out Scott's podcast at Play Like a Jet. Does fantastic work. Check it out on Apple, everywhere you find your podcast, Spotify, all that kind of thing. Make sure you're checking out our YouTube channel. We've got Pace's Playbook, breakdowns on every single player, and make sure every Wednesday night you're tuning in to Play Like a Jet live with U Stadium. You can find every episode we've done over the last 6 months across on U Stadium's YouTube channel. Make sure you're checking out other shows they've got on the network. They've got great shows with Green Bay and Dallas and the 49ers. Nick, Frankie, Bree, and Splash do some great work with Timeout. So make sure you check out everything that we're doing with Play Like a Jet and with U Stadium. Clay, let's cross our fingers and hope by this time next week, Zach Wilson is signed. I feel pretty confident about it. Looking forward to jumping into this camp and preseason period. It's going to be crazy. Good to be with you again for another hour for the New York Jets, and we'll see you next week, man. So anything you want to close off with?
No, man. I mean, I'm just counting down the days. I mean, I know we only got a couple more weeks till the first preseason game, and we didn't have preseason last year, so that's exciting. And then just a couple more weeks after that, we got week 1. As long as Wilson is under contract, which I know he will be, I think it's gonna be a fun season.
Well, that's it for us today, guys. We Play Like a Jet live and U Stadium. Catch us Wednesday night, 7:15 p.m. Eastern. We'll see you next week to cover everything New York Jets.